Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, today here at Film Snob Reviews, we have the luxury, the absolute pleasure of speaking with composer Gavin Brivik, and we're going to be talking about the score and the film that he scored called Wild Indian, which played at the 2021 Sundance Film Festival. Gavin, say hello to everyone out there in the world.
Hey, William. Thank you so much for having me, and great intro. I like the style.
Oh, well, thank you. It's just how we do things. Let's talk a little bit about this film in particular and the score and why you chose to make the score for this film. How did that go about? How did you get hooked up with this film?
It's kind of funny. I actually met Lyle through like a Facebook, out of all places. We had some mutual friends who were posting about him. They posted about him like getting accepted into the Sundance labs. So I decided to reach out over, just a Facebook message, and he, was familiar with some of my other work. So I was kind of lucky in that respect. And plus we had some mutual friends. So he ended up sending me the script, and this was in 2018. So he sent me the script in 2018, and then I wrote music just inspired by the text. And then that's kind of how I got the job. So it was a little unconventional, and we ended up using a lot of that music I wrote in the early cuts of the film. So it was kind of a cool, new process for me.
That's good to hear. And by Lyle, you're talking about the director Lyle Mitchell Corbin, who did a fantastic job with this film. What was now? I have heard some of your other work because I thought you did a brilliant job with the score for Cam. Really set the mood properly there, and that's good stuff.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, that's the film that Lyle had seen as well, and that's like the other most notable thing I've done.
Yeah, it's good work, man. I remember we saw it at, I think it was South by Southwest in 2018 and loved it. Glad to see Netflix picked that up. It was great.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great to see that you had seen that.
Now, what was your process for making the score for this film? Because obviously the film is very intense.
Right. We actually kind of cycled through a few different score ideas. The first score passed, I kind of wrote two scores for this movie. The first score was a very dark, ambient, more electronic and synthetic. And me and Lyle thought the sounds were really cool and we liked it. The problem was, like you said, the film's very intense and dark already, that the music was almost making it a little too much. There wasn't we really wanted the audiences to try to find some compassion and empathize with Makwa and Tedo. So we didn't want the film to feel too dark and ominous the entire way through, so that we didn't want people to hate the characters. So, and I think that the second version of the score was a lot more melodic. There was more emotional, a more emotional through line with the music, kind of orchestral with some strings. So that was kind of our process.
I like what you said there. I like that you had a plan, didn't go as you planned, and then you completely changed course, and it ended up working out. Because I agree with you. I think that all the characters in the film are very intense, and I'm not gonna lie to you, still don't like those characters. The character of Makwa.
Right, of course. Yeah. Definitely towards the end. So at least in the first act, you kind of, in the first act, maybe you felt sorry for him before some of the events unfold. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree. I think that you nailed it. And what I love is there's that tension, especially in that scene between Tedo and Makwa. And you know which one I'm talking about. I won't say what it is, but there's that tension in there. And was there, because there's not a lot of music playing in there, it's very subtle. Was that a decision that you and the director made, you and Lyle made?
Yeah, great question. We actually did have music in there, and then we cut it out. And that was our own, that was a mutual decision. I was very in favor of having no music there because I thought the performances were really strong, and it actually, I think sometimes silence is way more tense. just like think of any horror movie when they're right before the jump scare, there's always some sort of silent moment. I just think silence is very intense, and I think that's like its own type of scoring. I feel like scoring isn't just about where you're putting music, but it's also like where you're not putting music. And sometimes directors will want you to put music in areas that you really don't feel like it needs it, and that's kind of part of your collaboration, which is maybe convincing the director or like both Lyle and I didn't need any convincing there. We did 2 passes, one without music and one with, and we watched them, and it was just so obvious that the one without music was so much more intense. But I do think that was like a very I'm glad we did that. I think music may have actually softened that scene up too much.
I really feel like you nailed it with your first sentence there. The performances are really what take over that scene, and I think that you guys did exactly what you're supposed to do. You let the actors, and Michael Gray is fantastic in this, you let them take over that movie and hold it there. Your music is it just supplements that throughout, and that's one thing I can commend you for. It seemed like you had a perfect eye for what Lyle was trying to do, and you guys together formulated this echo chamber that worked perfectly for the film.
Thank you so much for saying that. Yeah, I think we were lucky to have the time we did. We definitely, like I said, we did 2 passes, and like maybe in a different world, if the pandemic never happened and we didn't have the pandemic almost prolonged our post process and what we ended up doing is for the first four months, March, April, May, June, we kind of took a break from the film. We were working on it a little bit before the pandemic, December and January of last year, and then I think we took a little break, and that space ended up clearing our heads and giving us both new approaches. The edit started changing a lot after that. The music direction changed, and I think that extra time gave us a lot of creative freedom to not feel super pressured by a deadline that was coming next week or something.
Good. I'm glad you guys took your time, because the end product just ends up working out. And I don't think there's enough of these stories told, and it seems like Lyle's the guy that's been telling them, and that's often really good to see. What is it like working with a director and kind of feeling like you guys are on the same page? How does that compare to times when you haven't been on the same page with a director?
Well, that's also a great question. I've never been asked that before, which is a great question. But it's really, honestly, when you're in sync with the director, or you feel very safe to experiment or to scrap ideas or to restart or to ask to just try music in this spot or remove music. And I think the more creative freedom you have, the better work you'll do. I'm sure we all can relate to that, where if you feel like your job's at stake constantly, or if the director is not liking what you're doing, how are you going to creatively do your best work? If you're feeling very anxious and stressed that everything you come up with the director doesn't like. I've been in those situations where it's I feel like every instrument I add to I'm oh, the director's going to hate this. So I just don't feel I don't have that flow state when writing, and I end up writing something maybe more generic or so safe that it's not really elevating the story. So I think that's kind of just the difference. Is I think when you are in sync, you do your best work, and then obviously you are good collaborators as well. Maybe sometimes it's hard for directors sometimes to communicate ideas about music when they don't know the musical language or study music. It's hard to kind of, find that balance.
That's a great answer, and I've noticed that, especially because I've spoken to other composers before, and it really does come down to whether the director understands music or not. That's a great answer. We talked a little bit about this particular project, but I kind of wanted to talk about you a little bit and your history and things like that. Who are some artists or musicians or even people in movies that you look to as inspirations?
Yeah, I have I think a lot of my big inspirations are, composers like Johnny Greenwood and One O Tricks Point Never. I love Mika Levy's work, and I really like composers like John Bryan's score for Punch Drunk Love is probably one of my all-time favorites, and I think composers who are maybe trying to score things unconventionally, like, not to say that, to be honest, like, obviously John Williams and Hans Zimmer and all these like incredible titans of the craft are like huge influences, but I think they've like done it all in a way. Like, it's been done, and if I don't want to sound like just another like cheap version of John Williams or Hans Zimmer, which I think is like a problem, like it's like kind of like cheap knockoffs of something, you have to kind of forge your own path. And I think the composers that that I just listed they all have their own voices. I mean, Johan Johansson is a massive influence on me, and I think composers like that, first off, they use like very unconventional methods of writing, kind of like they're not doing the standard technical writing that a lot of film composers do today. And then they also use a lot of like unconventional instruments or harmonies or melodies, and I feel like that stuff's really exciting to me.
I was just going to say that the use of cowbell in that Punch Drunk Love score, really unconventional.
Yeah.
It's weird. It's just rattling along there in between scenes. It's really weird.
Right.
I love it.
Yeah, there's like that scene in Punch Drunk Love where Adam Sandler's like stressing out in the warehouse, and like the boxes are falling, like everything's kind of falling apart, and the music's like got like the composer sampled like tape on like a lot of packaging materials, like he used as percussion. So he like ripped tape off of a cardboard box as a sound, and there's like scissors cutting stuff, and he put a lot of things in between piano strings. It's just very cool, like just to see how creative and different that score was, and a lot of, I mean, both the composers that work with PTA do stuff like that. So I totally understand. I think a lot of that also comes down to the director.
I was just going to say, you mentioned Johnny Greenwood, who's worked with PTA many times, and I feel like if you're going to work with PTA, you can't be a knockoff of anything. You have to be your own true self. And Johnny Greenwood, coming from Radiohead, he's kind of going to do whatever he wants.
Right, and I think he does it in the best possible way. And I think like I've listened to podcast interviews with PTA, and he talks about how they worked on the score for this movie or that movie, and I just love that they're both doing stuff that's just not conventional. Like a lot of the music will be written away from picture, and then PTA will edit to it later or this or that, and I think stuff like that is just exciting, and that's kind of why their scores stand out. So I mean, I really want to find filmmakers who want to do the exact same thing. Like I really want to be like a composer that can, find a voice or try to, get the opportunity to write pretty experimental stuff.
It's always good, and I like that you mentioned Michael Levy. That score for Under the Skin is it's one of the best scores in the last 10 years.
Yeah, she's doing like some of the most unique stuff, and writing a lot of the music Mika Levy's writing is away from the film too, and edited to it later and stuff like that. It's just very cool. The process is becoming different with technology, and I love kind of seeing what Mika Levy's up to next. Yeah,
she's one of the top. I think she's one of my favorite composers right now. So that's a great. The fact that you're inspired by her gives me hope that we can get more people who are doing some unique stuff like that.
Definitely.
So obviously we're a movie site and we talk a lot about movies. So we'd like to know from you, if you had a chance, if you're stuck on a deserted island, you could only have 2 movies with you. What 2 would you take?
Oof, that is the hardest question.
It is. And most people try to get out of it.
I honestly really don't know. It's so tough. I'll put Punch Drunk Love as one of mine.
Yeah, that's a good choice.
Maybe Vertigo. I don't know.
Ooh, that's a great pick. Okay.
The thing with Vertigo is that's like one of my other favorite scores, and just I'm obsessed with. I just love that movie, and I feel like I've watched it. My dad was a big cinephile, and kind of wanted to make sure I've seen all the classics when I was younger. Like he wanted me to know these big staples of genre films, and so I remember seeing Vertigo and North by Northwest when I was really young, and I love rewatching them every few years because I think musically that's one of my other favorite composers is Bernard Herrmann, so I think rewatching his work and kind of being influenced by the way that he wrote scores and how he at the time was he was the Johnny Greenwood of the time. It's hard for us to listen to it now. It sounds so Hollywood, but it's because his music was so original. Everybody after him ripped it off, and so I just think it's he's always been a big influence, and not as a person though. I don't think he was the most lovely person.
Yeah.
I don't think Hitchcock was either, but their work was really influential.
Yeah, and that's all that matters. If they're an influence, it doesn't matter the person they were. It matters the effect they had on you and your work as an artist.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. And I think musically speaking, Bernard Herrmann was very influenced by, he really didn't want to be labeled as just a film composer, and I don't think I do either. I just wrote my first album away from film that, we're releasing later this year, and I really want to write a lot. I would love to do music for ballets or operas, or even perform weird experimental ambient shows. I think Bernard Herrmann was really, concerned with being labeled, and I think I totally can relate to that as well.
That's awesome to hear, and I'm glad the album's coming out. I can't wait to hear that. That's going to be lovely to hear when that comes out. And we'll be on the lookout for it. Now, I only have 2 things left for you. The first one, you're a composer, but you're also a musician. At the end of the day, you're a musician.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of bands and artists do you like as a listener? Who do you like to listen to?
I listen to a ton. I would say I'll give you some varied genre music. I love Rival Consoles, if you're familiar.
Yeah.
Very cool electronic artists. I studied jazz guitar for quite a while, so I listen to a lot of jazz, but I don't find that jazz really seeps into any of my own music. I mentioned 10 Tricks Point Never, who did the score to Good Time and Uncut Gems, Daniel Lopatin, but prior to his scoring, I was such a fan of his albums, and kind of just, he's insane. His use of sound and his creative songwriting process is very unique. Aphex Twin was very influential. Dan Deacon. Let me think. There's so many. I love Animal Collective so much. You listen to them all the time. Let's see here. There's a lot. Those are some of the people I'm listening to now. But I grew up listening to a lot of classic rock, and I was a blues guitarist and I loved jazz. Wes Montgomery and all those types of guys. But the list could go on. It's a big list.
That's a great answer. I like that, and obviously we can tell that you love and understand your craft, and that's great to hear. Now, the very last thing that I have for you is, from your perspective, if you were going to sell me the film Wild Indian, how would you do so?
I would sell it as like a character-driven drama thriller that's very highly influenced by generational trauma in the Native community, specifically inspired by Lyle's own personal experiences. Like he's spoken and talked pretty heavily about how he even arrived to write the story and how each character kind of relates to people of his own community. So I would say it's kind of like a drama thriller character-driven piece that centers around like generational trauma and the Native community, but also is about like kind of how trauma manifests itself through each like generation, like how something from ages ago like seeps and affects a community, and that can lead to, it's kind of like a butterfly effect type of thing. It's hard. I'm sure there's a better way to sell it, but that's kind of, without like just doing what's already been done, like giving the synopsis. It's that's kind of like how I would sell it.
I wanted your perspective. That's all I wanted, and I think you did. I think you showed up well and gave us a great reason to check out this film. And you guys should check out this film, because not only is Gavin's work really good in it, but the whole cast and crew put together a wonderful film. And you guys should check it out whenever it does see a release. We were lucky enough to, of course, because of the Sundance Film Festival. Gavin, is there anything else you'd like to tell the audience before we let you go?
We have a cam vinyl release in the works for 2021. So if there's any listeners who in this, we just finished the artwork for the cam vinyl, and it's stunningly beautiful with like a pink vinyl, and it's going to be really cool. It's got the single for Missy Modell, which is like in the opening of the film. So we have, that's not Wild Indian related, but just some new music that will be coming out. So if anybody wants to kind of stay in touch with that, we'll have a lot more info, I think, in the next month or two.
Excellent. And where can they follow you and find that information if they wanted to on social media?
Yeah. I'm primarily just using Instagram these days, and that's just my full name, Gavin Brivik. And it should come up. I'm the only person in the world with that name. So I'm kind of lucky in that way. It's really easy to track me down. I also have a website, and if there's any people who want to like message me with more follow-up questions, I try to get back to everybody. I emailed a lot of people when I was getting my start, and I was so surprised to get a lot of responses. So I've always tried to pay it forward in that way.
That is amazing. We look forward to possibly getting our hands on that cam vinyl. Wink, wink. When it comes out.
Oh yeah.
We appreciate your time, Gavin. Thank you so much, man.
Oh, thank you. Great, really great questions, man. Like,